Kitsap this week is that, like every other county in the state, and something that our public health officer, Gib Morrow, no doubt will talk about around 1140, we were not rolled back to phase 2, while the 4 counties that were in phase 2 stayed in phase 2. And that's something that is of discussion in those 4 counties. I can absolutely guarantee it. So forgive my high horse or my medium-sized horse or my small horse. This isn't over. Mask up, stay safe. The vaccinated people can be with vaccinated people. Get your shot. The shot's an economic issue. It's a social issue. It helps us restore our economy as rapidly as possible. More about that, no doubt, at 1240. We're going to go ahead and start things off here at the Kitsap Digital Hour. We've got a jam-packed agenda today as you all start to join us. So Teresa's going to go ahead and share her screen, and we'll introduce who's talking, I think. But I don't have a song or anything, so I'm not going to be capable of doing that. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So we have 3 speakers today, and roughly we're going to do this in 20-minute blocks. We might be 5 minutes ahead or behind, however that works. We're starting things off with Skylar Olsen, who is a PhD and who is a national economist. Previously has worked in the area of housing, nationally recognized speaker. So she's going to talk for 20 minutes, cover some data, and bring it back home here to Kitsap, where she lives and where she's got her family and is a mom. And we're just excited to have her. Thanks for joining us, Skylar. We're also joined by Robert Contreras, who is the president of the Kitsap County Association of Realtors. Robert, did you say KCAR is 100 years old? Is that real?
That is real. We hit 100 years in 2019, so we're still going strong.
Yeah, and I thought KEDA, with its genesis in the late 70s, early 80s, was distinguished, but 100 years is really impressive, so congratulations. We've been talking a lot about the growth in Kitsap. We're kind of in the middle of it right now, so it's hard to know how impactful that growth is. Hopefully Robert can provide us some thoughts on the residential side of growth here in Kitsap County and what's happening with suburban areas like ours. 1140 will go to Gib Morrow, our public health officer, who is far more eloquent and has far more data to share about why vaccinations matter, why we need to stay on this, and why we need to drive our numbers back down. They've been escalating since early March. All right, enough from me, except one last thing. There is a great learning opportunity for human resources professionals, and it is May 12th. And you can find more on that at wshrma.org. WSHRMA, the West Sound Human Resources Management Association, I think. Lots of opportunity to improve your technical management of human resources and issues like that. So get lots of tips, check out the link. Now let's go to our first speaker, Skylar. Thank you, appreciate you. I owe you a pizza.
Yeah,
Take
you
it
do.
away.
Yeah, I remember that. Don't worry, I'm not gonna forget that one. Thank you so much for having me. Let's see, I'm gonna jump right in to some data and hope I land. Let's see, start in this spot. Do you guys see a graph in front of you? Okay, now it's gonna go into presentation mode. Is it still there? Do you still see it?
You're good.
Okay, great. Okay, wonderful. All right, so I'm gonna start just the way this presentation or this whole event, right, this whole hour is going to end with kind of emphasizing how important and how impactful this pandemic has been. Now I want to cast it in kind of to Kitsap's benefit on this graph, but you know, our last speaker will probably touch on the end of those time series where you see these lines going back up, right? So right in front of you here, these are COVID cases per capita, new cases over the last month that have been, you know, published by the New York Times. That collects it from, you know, other organizations, you know, all in one place, which is really great. And so you can see right here, you know, Kitsap in terms of per capita, we're on the lower end if you compare us to, say, King County or Pierce County, which has kind of been hit particularly hard over the course of the pandemic in terms of, per capita, right? So thank goodness for wide open spaces and our beautiful outdoors and our ability to distance better. And maybe everyone's got some good habits out there. So absolutely keep it up. Really important. And, from an economist perspective, let me share some insight with you on this one. At the very beginning of the pandemic, Goldman Sachs came out with some spectacular research. They partnered up with Google, where they can track people on their phones, right? And they know when you went to work, they know if you went shopping, they know if you took public transit, right? All tracking your movements on Google. They found that 75% of the activity drop back happened before lockdown orders even took place. Okay, so people will not go out and participate in the economy until everyone feels safe. Vaccines are totally making it happen, but if we have rises in cases again, right, it doesn't really matter. What matters about the lockdown orders is helping us all get to a place where cases are back down, right? Those lockdown orders aren't necessarily, if you lifted them today, are not going to bring a bunch of economic activity back until we have this under control. So I can't emphasize enough that the success and health of our economy is absolutely about getting COVID cases behind us. There we go. Gib, I bet you'll like that point. Okay, so now, as much as we might be doing, a little bit better than, say, our more dense neighbors to the southeast and east of us, it's still highly painful, right? This has been a very, very painful experience. And I really want to note, these are the unemployment rates that you have in front of you. And I know it's hard to see at the end. Kitsap County actually falls pretty closely underneath Thurston in that yellow line. That's why you can't really see that dark navy blue as much. King County right now has a lower unemployment rate, right, than the rest of them. King County has a lot more tech, remote work was easier to kind of come by, in those kinds of industries. So that came down a little bit more. But I want to point out, I hate the unemployment rate right now. As an economist, maybe as a feminist economist, I think it's highly important to point out that the unemployment rate really depends on people participating, right? It's how many people are in the labor force that are unemployed. In this crisis, so many people have had to take themselves out of the labor force, particularly stay-at-home parents. I have a stay-at-home dad, which is really great, and thankfully it was beforehand. I can't tell you, I watch my peers, watching kids at the same time they're trying to work, and I can't even imagine it. It makes me buy my husband lots of gifts, and thank that man every day, boy, for handling this situation, because this has been incredibly hard, and that employment is still really low. Now I want to show you this graph next. I can't get employment by industry for Kitsap County easily over this time series, but so here's Seattle. Now this is going to be important, even though Kitsap County is not included in here. When we think about kind of our development and our growth, we get a lot of spillover development from those high earning jobs that happen first in King County, well, in the Seattle metro, right? And then we're actually, Kitsap and down into Bremerton, still really a part of that. Maybe more and more so now, right? As remote work is making it more feasible to live further and further out, access greater affordability, which was a trend already happening, by the way. It's not like COVID was the only thing, that made that happen. Plenty of people have been moving out to Kitsap County from King to Pierce, even up to Jefferson and Thurston and beyond, simply because home ownership is so much less attainable after home values have grown so quickly. Those down payments are really, really hard to access. And at the same time, we've got a massive generation of would-be homeowners aging into home buying ages, the millennials out there. For the record, I like to refer to myself as an elder millennial because I feel like it makes me a little bit more cred, but still in that millennial camp. And we are coming for your homes. So here, what I want you to pay attention to in particular, in terms of jobs, check out information. I mean, Seattle is incredible. No other market, when you look at it, no, maybe not that's true anymore because these are very recent numbers, but it's pretty rare. And we are already beyond those pre-crisis employment levels in tech. Seattle bounced back like that, right? those tech jobs, those high earnings in the King County, though that economic engine is still rolling, right? And that's going to continue to have economic benefit for us. The fact that that engine is rolling hotter and faster than, the same kind of, high earning, remote friendly jobs in other metropolitan areas. So we're burning faster and hotter than LA and San Francisco and New York and Denver, our high earning jobs in that, related metro over there bounce back faster than all of them. We're going to benefit from that in the development over on this side. Okay, now I am also showing this graph because we have more than our fair share of the industries that are really taking a hit here. And if this is any sign, of the pain, right, of the income loss, I mean, this is a big one. If we look at average incomes, they're actually up over time, right, because of those high earning incomes, kept moving. And for those that could still work, essential workers, we did see some hazard pay lift there. Now I'm going to keep going quickly because I know I have, I do talk a lot. I mentioned before that remote work is providing an opportunity potentially, right, for outer lying communities to develop maybe faster than they otherwise would have. That trend was already taking place, that we saw the faster home value growth in cities that were further away from the primary job cores. That was pre-existing before pandemic. Has a lot to do with the size of the millennial generation and the fact that the boomers are not vacating their homes. Maybe the boomers aren't vacating them homes because the millennials never moved out in the first place. And for a large subset of the population, they're millennial kids and the Gen Z kids, they're moving back home too. We had record amounts of people moving back in with mom and dad at the beginning of this pandemic. So when we think about the challenge to inventory, about that kind of changeover, generational changeover happening, this is getting rough. And we see that here. Look at the scale. For these blues, when you go to the dark blue, this is home value growth at the city level, not median price growth, home values. So I'm controlling for the changing mix of homes that are sold from one month to another, trying to watch that full value, the home value across the full stock move. These are pretty big numbers. If I hover over, let's get up to, so Bainbridge Island, where I am, that's home value growth of 14%. That's radical. Okay, that is constrained inventory and a lot of demand coming this way. If I move further down into Bremerton, 17%. This is wild. To kind of show you the wild, by the way, I have a lot of other data in here. So if we do Q&A, feel free to ask me. I can show you all sorts of things at the city level to look at that change. But let's look at these time series that kind of really capture the extreme heat that we've got going on here. So here are some of our cities in Kitsap County. And these are percentages, as in this is 16%. It just doesn't format nicely because I want to be able to change it if someone else wants to see it. So it doesn't look quite that way. But you can see this kind of extreme heat happening in the housing market. And a lot of it has to do with inventory just really being eaten up so fast. So here is active listing count. Let's just look at it, not year over year, but just regular. You can see it start to plummet, right, in terms of the number of homes that are available for sale. Now, okay, it's not just remote work though, driving people out here. And it's really not just the fact that the millennials are such a big generation. And if you were already going to be a home buyer, you were less likely to lose your job, right? Because pre-pandemic, home buyers had to have much more income than they had before. They had to have a much higher credit score. They tended to be in industries that were less impacted. And so all those millennials and all those would-be buyers still rushed into the market, and you saw that heat. Great, that's absolutely driving it. This is a big part of it as well. Looking at this 30-year mortgage rate. Do you remember back, 2012 and 13, and maybe a little bit in 2016, where we were talking about just how record low those mortgage rates were, where we went. I mean, I just couldn't even, it's just, so much of this experience as an economist and watching these time series has been watching numbers go to places you never thought they could. So looking at how low that 30-year mortgage rate went for prime borrowers is pretty outstanding. It's already started to tick up, right? It's ticking up kind of fast. Now, a lot of the tick up is starting to come because people are being concerned about inflation, right? And understandably so. We have started to see a lot of signals that inflation is going to start coming up, right? So here I'm looking at the consumer price index over time. So this is observed inflation is the light green, right? But if I look at this 30-year break-even inflation rate, that's the inflation that's implied by what the market expects from those treasury bonds, right? What would the inflation have to be for me to break even on a 30-year treasury bond over that period of time? So it gives me a market expectation for like where's inflation going? And it is trending up fairly quickly. The problem with, now people point to things like, you know, the massive stimulus bills, and I could see it if so much of that spending didn't go to lower income Americans, especially in the second time around. And if the joblessness and the lack of the ability to pay for basic essentials wasn't so constrained, right? I'm not too worried about a market overheating. I'm also not too worried because it's very hard to make, maybe let me put it this way. It's not that I'm not worried. I'm always looking at data and I'm very concerned. But when we look at the price pressures, there's so much going on, and a big part of what's going on is also supply chain. So if we think about, oh, okay, how about the building that's going on? You know, the booms and permits that's going on in areas where people want to live and development is happening faster and faster, like Kitsap County. Well, this is a problem. This in front of you, look at softwood lumber prices. They're up almost over 4x. Now imagine you're a builder, you put in your order 6 months ahead because you plan, you know, how many homes you're going to build over this period of time. You put that order in, but you don't pay the market price until the lumber comes in. So you ordered lumber back here and you pay it here. And that's wild. And builders are really, really struggling. And this is mostly about supply chain. Southern lumber in the South is starting to pick back up again. Those mills are opening, hopefully, knock on all the wood all the time, right? Hopefully this is going to start coming back to normal soon, and that can ease a lot of our development costs and, you know, how we're going to get it done. But this too, kind of, I think is a nice kind of example, right, of when we think about prices and we start getting really worried about inflation, there is a lot going on, right? This is what people are worried about, inflation reaching those 1980s levels, okay? We're nowhere near there, but if I zoom in, we can see we're trending that way, and people are starting to be a bit worried. I think, though, we can take a lot more economic stimulus. I don't know that we can take low interest rates for so much longer. I mean, it does put a lot of pressure on asset prices, brings people, you know, to the assets. Final thoughts, just to re-echo kind of what I've already iterated. Kitsap County is still suffering like lots of other places because of the joblessness is still widespread, especially in certain industries. But if we look long run, we have a better ability to bounce back as a great opportunity for remote work residents, being so near a job market that's recovering faster than almost any job market across the country. And frankly, I think this is a beautiful place to be. That's why I'm here. I don't know about you guys, but I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, an almost 5-year-old. And I'm at Fin River Cidery almost every weekend just to get out and enjoy this place. It's a really beautiful thing. Though, does Fin River Cider pop me up out of Kitsap? I think it does, doesn't it? But you get what I mean. Over on this peninsula, up and down, is a beautiful place to be. And I think we have good legs. We just got to get to the other side. So I'll pause there. And if there are any questions or
Thanks. I know we'd like people to put questions, if you could, using the Q&A. Kathy's monitoring the chat, but we'd love questions in Q&A. And thanks, Skylar. And, you know, we love our friends in Jefferson and Clallam counties as well. So no problem to give Fin River a shout out. Also,
Cool.
no problem. Give Bushel and Barrel a shout out. Some new cidery here in Kitsap. We love it all. All right. Sorry, Kathy, you're up.
No open questions, although there were a couple of folks commenting that, you know, it doesn't really matter what industry, companies are having a challenge finding new employees.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. You bet. Yeah. And I think a lot of that is driving some of the, I think, frustration with the economic support, right, that had been kind of maybe given so widespread. And it's going to be, I think, a lot of having that idea of like talking about, okay, how are we going to find employees? One, I think it's very valid that employees don't want to still go out and work until they're vaccinated, right? Remember, many people are more concerned than maybe you're aware of about their own personal health risk. And that is still impacting their willingness to work. So maybe just start there. But the second thing, kind of two elements here, is there's a concern, of course, about inequality. And when, you know, such low wage workers then receive, you know, the monthly, you know, payments, whether in that unemployment insurance extensions, whether that disincentivizes a return to work. And that's a really sticky kind of question to talk about. And it will be challenging until we get to the end of this and back to stable.
I'm not sure how much time we have. Kiaha, can you put your question in the Q&A, please?
Before I answer that question, I went to this slide real quick because this is a roll-up measure, this market heat index that I made. It's basically just looking at, for each kind of time point, various metrics like new listings per 1,000 homes in the housing stock. So that would take heat down, right? If I was getting new listings over time, how much active listings have fallen over time, how quickly home prices are growing, how few homes have a price cut. Those kinds of heat metrics kind of rolled together. So you can kind of tell who's kind of experiencing maybe the most growth that's going to drive kind of future home value growth and then also, you know, development. This is where a lot of people are interested. So you're looking at your Silverdale up top. On the rise is Bremerton, like we saw earlier. Poulsbo's starting to slow down a little bit. Bainbridge Island already starting to slow down a little bit. Manchester, boom. Eastport Orchard. I'm sorry, should I read the chat? I don't have the chat part.
No, there's just folks talking about, you talked a lot about millennials, so there was, you know, some back and forth about that, which I loved.
Anyone want me to make the avocado toast argument? Because, you know, come at me, boomers.
And we do have a nice reminder from Holly Ridge that they work with companies to employ folks with different abilities. So if that type of employment opportunity would work at your company, please call Holly Ridge. There was someone that had raised their hand and I had asked them to put their question in Q&A, but I don't see it. So Joe, are we out of time?
No, we're okay. We have a little bit of time, and some of what Robert's going to talk about is a bridge to this. Oh, yeah. Kiaha Long was promoted. So Kiaha, if you could unmute and ask your question.
I don't have a question right now. I'm just listening more in. I'm just taking it all in. But when I do, I'll pose a question. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Because you had raised your hand. Okay.
I didn't mean to do that. I apologize.
No worries.
Our mistake. So listen, two quick questions for Skylar.
Sure.
The first question is, so I don't know how much capital the US Treasury printed in the Great Recession, $1 trillion, $1.5 trillion. We have an $8 trillion balance sheet that we're running right now.
Oh yeah.
So this is unprecedented. And you said that we can handle more stimulus. But
well, it depends on where it goes. Depends on where it goes, I think. And that matters a lot. So I think, so not every dollar spent in the budget is the same, right? Kind of one of the ways to think about it, I think, is what is an area of the economy that can readily absorb because it hasn't been stimulated for a long period of time. One of the big concerns actually with the stimulus or criticisms, one of the common, not big, let's say common criticisms of the stimulus spending back in the aughts when we were handling the global financial crisis is, surprisingly enough, that it wasn't enough and it wasn't actually targeted towards lower income, and that widening inequality starts to be a real drag on the economy in the form of clearly, political unrest and that kind of thing. Also crime, and we've seen, all these things kind of build over time. And so that lower income end of the economy has just not seen incomes grow in so long that I think you could spend down in that income range and not see inflationary pressure at the top. That's actually one of the reasons in here. And maybe we can play with this kind of offline too, if you have concerns to kind of think about it. But when we look at where is some of the inflationary pressure coming from, it's a lot from obviously all that spending, but in terms of how it makes its way through, it is more on the higher end and kind of assets that are booming. And that's kind of driving, I think, a lot of the overall concern too, housing expenses, things like that.
Well, let's use the time to transition over to Robert and to get some of his thoughts and some of his data points on Kitsap County. And Kathy and I will continue to engage as we move forward. Skylar, thank you so much. And we may have more questions.
Yeah, for sure. I'll stick around.
If you have more questions for Skylar, just throw it in the Q&A, please. Robert?
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I want to kind of frame up how I'm going to be looking at things. It's super tough as a real estate broker to follow up an economist because they're talking about the same things we're talking about, just way better than the way we talk about it. So a lot of the same data and statistics are the things we use, but ultimately, I think the point that we need to look at is that we are looking at data and statistics. We are doing our very best to try to figure out what's coming by looking back. It's a lot like driving the car down the freeway while staring into the rearview mirror. And one of the things I'm always telling my clients and other people that I speak to is that anytime a real estate agent starts talking about what's coming in the future, when they look at the crystal ball, is because they're trying to sell you something. And so I'm going to do my very best to kind of frame this up in what's going on now and how we kind of look at the data that we have. So with us, we're getting most of our statistics from the Northwest MLS. That's what a lot of us here in Kitsap County depend on for our market information. And so Northwest MLS is where we are all sending our listings. That's where all of our purchases and sales go through. And so that's where we get our statistics. And so Northwest MLS every month puts out a nice report for us so that we can kind of see what has happened in Kitsap. And so what I'm working off are the Northwest MLS reports. We also have a tool called InfoSparks, which allows us to focus in on the exact type of data that we're looking at. That way we can answer questions that are more specific for our clients. So one of the things that we have seen and all through 2020 was this very surprising increase in the housing market. What we were kind of all expecting when everybody got told to stay home was that everybody across the board would stay home and that anything that impacted the economy would universally impact everything. But we had this inverse response that frankly caught everybody by surprise, where all of a sudden the housing market took off. And we were kind of one of the outliers with, companies like Amazon and other delivery companies that were suddenly thriving in this new environment. We didn't expect housing to do the same thing, but here we are. So we saw in 2020, looking at some of the metrics I'm looking at, we were in a market where we had about 300 new listings on the market, and we had a total in Kitsap County of 457 houses on the market. We were already in a housing crisis when this whole thing started. We use this algorithm where we talk about inventory levels. And this algorithm, basically the kind of the nuts and bolts of it, if we stopped bringing on new listings today, how long would it take us to sell all of the houses on the multiple listing service. And so we call that our months of supply. And typically 4 months is kind of what's usually 4 to 6 months is usually what we consider to be a balanced market. We've been under 2 months for years now. In fact, when we went into this, we were at 1.3 months. And now we're at less than half of a month. We're talking a couple of weeks. So critical inventory levels, that's down just over the last year from April to April, 61% fall in the number of houses that are available. Going back to what we talked about with, home buyers are still out there because our pending sales are up 36%. There is still a fevered pitch of buyers that are out there fighting for these same houses. And so this supply and demand element is definitely one of the things that's really impacted us. One of the conversations I'm having over and over and over and over again is it's not a bubble conversation. We're all kind of suffering collectively through the post-traumatic stress of 2007. And so a lot of us are just waiting for it to pop, or a lot of people are waiting for it to pop. And really, there's so many different elements to what's happening here that one of them could go away. Like one of the things that Skylar talked about was our record low interest rates, numbers that nobody imagined we'd ever see. If we take those away, we might see a softening. We might see a little bit of a slowdown, but there's so many other elements in play that that's not going to be the fix. This whole thing is not resting on just interest rates. So we've got a lot of things playing into this. One of the other statistics on here that I found just fascinating is the percent of list price received on houses that are being sold. And last year, in a very hot market, that was 101.2%. So, our typical home is going for just over list price. Now, this last month, 107%. That means that on our average sales price in Kitsap County, and this is a number that's going to blow your mind, average sales price, $601,000 last month. 107% means that people are coming in $55,000 over list price. That's bonkers. And so, fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it, because depending on where you're standing in the marketplace, defines whether it's good or bad. Is this a good market? Is this a bad market? It's just a market. Your position to the market is what determines if it's good or bad. But all that extra money that's coming into the marketplace is really what's pushing this. If this was built just on loans like we saw in 2007, we wouldn't be able to compete like this because everybody would still have no money in their pockets. But we're seeing real capital being infused into the housing market, which has given us this 26% boost in the housing cost. So one of the other things that I find fascinating on this is we talk about developments. We're usually talking about new construction. And Skylar even talked about the price of soft lumber going up 4 times. Well, I don't know if you know this, but wood is kind of important when you're building a house. And so that immediately impacts the cost of new construction. Now in Kitsap County, just going from 1 year to the next, we're talking about a very, very small time frame. We're talking about new construction being a percentage of the houses that are available. And so what we saw last year, let me pull up my right graph here so I'm giving you the right numbers. Homes for sale just a year ago, where we were talking about, let me get to the right month, total number of houses for sale across 522, with new construction being 156 of those, 367 being residential resale. Why is this important? Well, because that percentage closes down as all of our inventory lessens. We only have right now, April 2001, new construction is 107 houses, previously owned 202 for a total of 309. New construction is now 33% of the marketplace. And if 33% of the marketplace sees their costs raised by 4 times, that is going to have an adverse impact on the rest of the market, because people aren't really concerned about, and economists will say, it doesn't matter if it's houses or a can of beans, the same principles apply. And suddenly if that can of beans, you've got, your brand new fancy can of brand name beans is all of a sudden, $10 a can. It's not going to take too long before the discount stores have their older can of beans that are suddenly going to creep up from 79 cents up to $1.50, $2, $3, because these are guiding what the market cost of beans are. And so houses are doing the same thing. So that's kind of the really quick and down and dirty. I'm always want to be very careful with these. I was actually talking to Teresa before we came here. There's been a few times where I've been invited to come speak to places, and I've looked at the other speakers and the audience, and I've said, wow, I'm over my head. And so this kind of feels like one of those. So before I prove myself a fool, I would like to just stop what I've got going here and then open it up for any questions or clarification that might happen. And then also just want to say real quick, a thank you to my CEO from Kitsap Realtors, who I saw in the chat box, throwing in some data and statistics from the National Association Realtors, talking about the conversation with millennials, who are our largest home buying group right now and our fastest growing. And that's really from a sales and marketing standpoint where we're really kind of focusing our efforts, because that's our biggest client base. So it's our biggest pool to fish from. Hope that's beneficial, and hope this has been worth your time. And again, I'm going to be open for any questions that or conversation that may arise from this.
Okay, there's a couple of questions. So a single family home near downtown Bremerton was just sold as an airspace condo. The new owner has to pay a monthly HOA fee, and the property parcel was then divided into the home, a separate ADU, and the HOA. Is this a new thing? And how will that impact the market?
Yeah, so great question. This is a brand new thing. And it's funny that this question would pop up here, because as a managing broker in my office, I just got this question from an agent. So I think this is one of my agents that's actually doing this. And the response to that was, geez, I'm not sure. This is not something we typically do. One of the things that about real estate brokers, and this comes from Washington State agency law even, is that we are able to advise on regular real estate transactions, but as soon as something gets a little bit sideways, we're supposed to recommend consulting attorneys. And so this is kind of one of those things where it's like, maybe we need to talk to an attorney, because airspace condos is not something that we see in Kitsap County much. And so there's a lot of different things that are happening in the marketplace. And when I say, not just on homes, but even brokerage models and the way we're doing business, and whether it's Airbnb or VRBOs, that new type of hospitality model. And now we're seeing, real estate brokerages that are completely virtual, don't have buildings, and do everything online. We're seeing a lot of different things that are, experimental, and they might be the next new thing. They might be a flash in the pan. We really don't know. And as we're really tackling housing, one of the things I heard in that question was the ADU, is that we are seeing ADU restrictions ease up quite a bit. ADUs have been typically in Kitsap County something that's only used for a family member or someone in need of care who can then live on a property. And then once that use is no longer needed, that ADU has to go away. And so now we're seeing some easing on those regulations so that we could use ADUs for housing. And Bremerton has just pushed through some legislation that's going to ease up some restrictions. And so hopefully we'll be able to see how that impacts. I know Mayor Becky Erickson was talking to us a year ago or so, or maybe even a little more than a year, about Paulsville looking into an ADU program. And so I hope this is really kind of the first step into seeing our cities and even the county explore how we can use ADUs to maybe ease up some of the housing, because housing is such a big subject. It's not just the purchase and sale of homes. We're talking about people that are renting, and the homelessness component is a part of that. And so really we want to see housing for everybody, and in the housing chain, there's a purpose to every single point. And so really that introductory housing, the missing link in the chain there for us has been really easy entry-level housing, whether it be apartments, cheap purchasing, or condominiums. It's just something that's kind of missing here. So it's not all the way gone, and we can point to examples where it exists, but there's not quite enough there. So I'm really excited to see what we can do with ADUs. And I know very salesman kind of danced around the question of the airspace condominium. Honest answer, I don't know. We'll have to just wait and see.
Okay. And yeah, ADUs do vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So I think Bremerton's probably the most active in that area, but I could be wrong. But you would have to check if you're in city limits or unincorporated Kitsap County, what applies if that's something you're thinking of. So this is another question. Any comment to add about Growth Management Act stifling the supply issue? I doubt very much there are any changes coming to growth management that would impact how things are done.
Yeah, great question. And that sounds like it's a question that's coming from someone who's kind of familiar with the realtors' position on the Growth Management Act. So since we became a growth management state, and I'm just going to back up a little bit to kind of give some context. One of the things that most people don't really wrap their head around is being a realtor doesn't necessarily mean that I'm just here to help buy and sell homes. Being a realtor's primary function is a political lobbying group. We're advocates for property ownership rights. That's our primary responsibility. And so we're formed as an organization to speak with our legislators or electeds to be able to find great solutions for property owners and property rights. So with that, we have been involved in the conversation with growth management for a long time. And of course, depending on where we are politically and where we tend to either want to play nice or just completely go to war. And so right now it feels like I would say we're probably playing nice with legislators and our electeds, which doesn't make everybody happy, but in politics, is everybody really happy anyways? But we are addressing this at the state level. This is one of those things where Kitsap County, a lot of our members, a lot of our officers are also officers and electeds at the state level. So, myself, I just got elected as vice president of operations at the state level. So I'm jumping in as an officer at that level. The president-elect is one of our members. Our regional representative is our immediate past president, Irene Garcia. So, we've got a lot of people that are involved there, and that's where we get to have those conversations with the state, because growth management is a state thing. And really, the county's unfortunately burdened with the interpretation that they get from states. They're kind of given their marching orders and they have to do. So we try to help them as much as we can by listening to what they have to deal with and implementing growth management, then take that to the state. It's a constant conversation. It is nonstop, and it's always, this is kind of a sloppy metaphor, but it's like pushing up against a Jello wall. You push one section and it really seems like you're working, and then suddenly another portion bulges out that you didn't expect. And so now you run over there. And so it's an ongoing conversation. And I really hope that as we continue to have this conversation, we're going to find real applicable and actionable solutions for people on the ground, because we've got people that are hurting, that are directly impacted by these things, and we got to find real solutions for them. Because like we talked about, this, and Skylar said it real eloquently in that, home buyers that were home buyers are still home buyers because they kept their job, and people who were not going to be home buyers or were kind of on the edge, they're the ones that got pushed off the cliff. Well, that group that's pushed off the cliff, unfortunately, too often they get forgotten about. And so I think that's where we can do a better job, is helping them, because they're the ones that really need that. And so figuring out what that looks like. And I think ADUs are probably going to be our best bet right now, because it's going to be the least amount of environmental impact and new regulation, it will be something that we can do on existing property.
But you can't buy an ADU, right? Like it doesn't become a for sale property. It just becomes rental income for the primary property, right?
Well, and again, however, the property owners, that's the way it's going to start. And, we'll have to see how this is implemented in each of the cities. But yeah, in order to become a saleable property, now we're talking about splitting lots, and that's again, that's not going to fly in the current GMA. And so how do we then create this extra inventory? But it is available inventory to the that at-risk group who's having a hard time just finding a place to live right now.
Well, for sure, yeah. And for families to get access to some of these communities, right? As opposed to kind of sticking into apartment housing, that for them to have more space, it's really.
Sure.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I like the ADU thing as well, but I have a colleague who really worries, that widespread ADU will make it harder to upzone. And then it just becomes, more people rent single family homes or you rent ADUs, right? As opposed to actually providing a path towards home ownership for those people that were on the cusp that now it's going to be so challenging because of what home values have done, and yeah.
Well, if I had to, if there's two things that have stood out to me today, one is that, and it's kind of like, duh, we already knew, available housing is really an issue now in our community, and it's gonna be an issue. And, so much so that the Navy talked about it recently. It's just like, well, how do our newest enlistees, how do you afford housing in Kitsap County? And there's going to be a lot of that. And I think that as a community, we have to work on it. But Gib's here to tell us to eat our vegetables. And I hope that joke went over well in cyberspace. Gib, back to you. Take it away. And we'll finish up in about a couple minutes 1 minute before the hour. Gib, thank you.
All right, so this will be a speed tour, and just to throw false dichotomies out the window, public health is highly dependent on a good economy and vice versa, and increasingly in public health, we are recognizing the importance of those social determinants of health, housing, jobs, a healthy economy, a good built space environment, a good ecosystem to really promote positive public health measures. So we're going to zip through this pretty quickly, but this is just piggyback on what Skylar was saying. Pandemic's not over. As you can see, we're in the throes of, I don't know if we call them waves or swells or what, but we are in a high level of disease activity, a little bit below where we were around the turn of the year, but still pretty darn high, and keep rolling. I was going to click through these kind of fast, so I'll just let you know. Weekly cases, we're seeing about 325 this week. So we're still seeing, 30 to 40, 45 people each day getting sick with this. The positivity percents are high. Keep going. Just basically letting you know that the pandemic's not over here. We dodged the rollback bullet by the skin of our teeth, as Joe indicated. It would have been a done deal for the case rate. We've been over 200 consistently since April 18th. The hospitalization rate was the one that was going to be touch and go, and we were watching that quite closely. The day of reckoning for that, as you can see, was going to be April 21st. And in the next slide, you can see that that was one of 2 days in the latter half of April where our hospitalization rate actually dipped low enough to allow us to skate. So we would have landed back in phase 3 if the governor hadn't paused things, but not by a lot. Just so heads up, we got a couple of weeks to work on things. Keep rolling here. Why do vaccinations work, and how do we know they work, and why are they crucial? I really want to talk about that issue. I want to talk about what you can do to help get our community vaccinated, because I think your people of influence that can really make this happen. The graph on the left shows the uptake in vaccinations in the older cohort. So those two top lines are 65 to 75 and 75 and up. The graph on the right shows what's happened with disease activity. And if you look at that yellow, the lowest cohort there, it's almost an inverse relationship. So as we vaccinated that group, their disease activity dropped the fastest and the steepest. Everybody was going down at that point because we were sort of coming off a wave. But despite that, the group that's been vaccinated with the best vaccine penetration has 1/5 the case rate of the 15 to 35-year-old crowd. So just pay attention to that. And next slide, please, Teresa. Outbreaks are going up again. As you can see, we're looking at 25 already in the month of April. That's up from 17 last month. That's a lot, but exactly 0 of those currently are in long-term care facilities where we've got almost everybody vaccinated. So just think about that in terms of your workplaces, if you will. Vaccines work in long-term care facilities. They also work in your workplaces and in your places of business and in your schools and on your sports clubs. So how are we doing in Kitsap? To be honest, not that great. We're lagging the state numbers. We're way behind Jefferson. Smaller counties tend to do better in a lot of ways, and there are a lot of reasons for that. I think Skylar might have picked on Pierce, so I'll do the same a little bit. We're ahead of Pierce, but again, there really is a correlation not only across counties, but within counties in terms of disease activity and where vaccines are happening. And again, those are kind of inverse relations that we would like to really correct. Next slide, please. Oh, and before I should go back to that last one, before we leave that, I do want to say that we're actually doing a little bit better in Kitsap than this data off the state dashboard would indicate. And the reason for that is that the military is given about 30,000 vaccines that aren't getting counted in this tally here. That's also true. There are a lot of folks that have been vaccinated through a few clinics up on Bainbridge that haven't had addresses entered. And so we don't have 100% of all Kitsap residents that have been vaccinated in this tally, but we could be doing better. Next slide. So this is an interesting visual that was put together by one of our epidemiologists, Andrew Lau, yesterday. And this none of these indicate voting patterns, just so you know. Although there may be a component there, but what you can see in the left upper graph is case activity. Bluest, hyper blues are the lowest, and reds are the highest. And so, again, Kitsap, North Kitsap and down into Bainbridge, that sort of far western side are places that have had relatively lower disease activity. They're also the places that are the most heavily vaccinated, which is that lower left graph. And again, there's some correlation there. The upper right one is median household income. And that's kind of on a color-coded scheme from about 49,000 bucks a year to 120 or thereabouts. And the graph on the lower right is a percentage of those with higher education degrees. So I think it's important to understand where cases are happening, where vaccinations are happening, and what some of the contributing factors really may be. Next slide, please. So vaccine demand, we got the capacity, we got the vaccines. Where the heck are the patients? Where are the people that want them? It's just a plummeting demand. That little visual in the right lower corner shows the number of vaccines that are being requested by Washington providers and those that are available from the federal government. There's just been a really precipitous drop. Those numbers were inverse mirror images of each other just a few weeks ago. And so we're running out of steam. We're filling up 10% of our appointments, and we need more people to keep coming because we're not there yet. Next slide. So what's COVID costing your organizations? I mean, have any of your businesses lost revenue? Have there been any lost productivity? Have you had people out on, absenteeism? Have you lost workers? What do you think is going to happen to your health insurance costs? Have you had to hire a COVID coordinator? Has there been any other unanticipated overhead, plastic barriers? I mean, I can't even imagine what this is costing our businesses. The lower left graph is a year-to-year change in personal consumption of healthcare resources. It just bottomed out last year. This goes back to the 1960s to the present. And trust me, there is a tsunami of people with undiagnosed cancers. All of these things are going to really kind of heavily impact, the economy and add to increased overhead for all of us. At this point, I want to sort of segue a little bit into trying to get the rest of our population vaccinated, because that's what's going to take to really end this pandemic. There is increasing interest in people receiving vaccinations, but there's still a whole lot of folks that have not yet done it. Keep rolling on the slides. So why do it? It's not just about your own personal health. It's about protecting those around you, driving this disease activity down. Bill Nye, the science guy, said everybody who is unvaccinated out there is an incubator for aggressive and destructive new variants. I hope people are listening to them and to him, because there's a lot of truth in that. The economic recovery is dependent on getting people vaccinated. This has had a staggering cost on our society, and you all know it, we all know it. We need to get our schools safe, our workplaces safe, and we need to get back to normal. Vaccines are the ticket there. So let's talk about them first and foremost, and let's get them all done. Next slide. So how do we get people off the fence? We need to make it easy, convenient, safe, available, fun, attractive. We as leaders in the community need to model that behavior. We need to make it an expectation in the workforce. We need to be transparent. I learned yesterday that 93 out of our 127 public health district employees are vaccinated. The other 30 I'm going to go, talk to with a needle in my hand. I think we need new policies in workplaces, in schools, and in healthcare. We need to provide the information. We need to create and craft creative incentives. Mandates are obviously a last, last place you want to go. But hey, if we need to go there, we'll go there. I know the Navy is planning on doing it as soon as Pfizer achieves full approval, and I think that's great. Really just need local leadership across all sectors. And next slide, please, Teresa. So incentives, pay your employees, it works. That's what that top one says. If you have Republicans who patronize your businesses and they want to take their masks off, tell them to go get vaccinated and you'll let them do it. Next slide. Specific sectors, healthcare. I've been laying that on our local docs. They need to be tracking vaccination status as the new fifth vital sign. They need to be offering on-site vaccinations. Nobody should be leaving the doctor's office without a shot in their arm if they are vaccine naive. They need to be tracking the uptake in patients and the staff as a quality metric. Not one of us should ever be afraid of catching COVID from a healthcare provider. And I'm proud to say that the hospitalist group that I was part of until very recently has 100% of its 30 or 40 docs all vaccinated at this point. Schools need to be educating. That's what schools do. Seniors need to be doing their culminating projects on getting their classmates vaccinated. We need interscholastic competitions between North Kitsap and Central Kitsap in terms of which group's graduating with the highest vaccination percent. Employers like all of you really need to be doing the same. Use this as a marketing tool. Hey, I'll go to a restaurant that has 100% of its service people all vaccinated. Before I go to some places that look a little sketchier. Government, what do we need to do? Identify and fill the gaps, provide some mobile units, policies, tax credits, incentives, education, toolkits. But at the end of the day, it's down to each of us to share, inform, transport, encourage, find 2 people each week and get them vaccinated. Next slide. I think I'm getting almost done. This is cost saving versus cost effective. There are very few things in healthcare that are truly cost savings. Cost effective, if an intervention saves you, if it costs you $100,000 for 1 year of life saved, it's considered a good deal. For every penny you spend on vaccines, which is 0, you save the system money. We save our money and we grow our economy. Next slide. I think I'm pretty much done. This next one should be it. So local solutions and levers. We're seeing this. I think Kitsap Transit is going to have some good news for us soon. We need to make it easy. Workplaces, schools, brew pubs, ferry lines, grocery stores, your businesses. If you want to offer vaccines in those settings, you let us know. We'll help you set it up. Employer-based incentives to your employees. I'm telling you what, your employees are vaccinated, are doing the right thing. They're saving your business's money. You should pay them for that. Or pay them to do it, and make it and figure out what those incentives might be for your patrons. Discounts, perks, priorities. I'm not sure what your solutions are, but if you come up with any good ideas, we're at the Health District here and available to help. So really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I hope that was fruitful, and look forward to working with you to meet our very mutual objective.
Gib, thank you so much. And, I put it in the chat. This is like the #1 thing in front of all of us and what we all need to accomplish in order for life to even start to move towards something like normal. And I just really appreciate KPHD. We appreciate your constant messaging on this. And please let us know how we and the business community and the public and private employers in this community can encourage our community to get vaccinated. Look, the truth is, if we had stuck with the original metrics, we would have gotten by on a technicality. All our businesses would be cut from 50% capacity down to 25% capacity. And we're running out of time. The Northwest is seeing a little bit of an increase when the rest of the country is starting to see decreases in their overall COVID numbers. So, we need to remain vigilant. All right. There's still a lot of issues out there. There's still a lot of people in economic pain. Smallbizhelpwa.com can get you the information you need about the Restaurant Relief Fund, about nonprofit grants, about the shuttered venue operators grants, and childcare support. Thank you. We do have Jamie Forsyth on the line. We are a little over time, so I would recommend that you email Jamie. She is a 100% free resource. She's amazing and an MBA and a genius, and she cares about your business. Email kitsapsbdc@wwu.edu when you can. If you need help with business or you need help tying to federal resources to save your business, email her. Some loan forgiveness and restaurant revitalization fund webinars are coming up. Our next, and more resources online from the Seattle Chamber, it looks like, related to CPA things. And there is plenty of information about recovery legislation in other languages at SBA.com. Our next event is June 3rd. I think we're going to be looking into interesting programs that increase entrepreneurship in this county, in Kitsap County, one that doesn't get enough attention. That's my hope. And I think we're going to be hearing from business owners about their year. Email us, kitsapeda.org, morrison@kitsapeda.org. Thanks to all our speakers. Appreciate you. See you next time, Kitsap. Bye-bye.